Welcome to Beauty Confidential, Conversations from the Lounge, the place where unscripted conversations meet the real behind-the-scenes experiences of the beauty industry. I'm your host, Christina Wilson, and today we're starting with the question everyone thinks they know the answer to until they're actually inside the process. This episode pulls back the curtain on how beauty products actually come to life. The vision, the expectation, timelines, costs, creative decisions, sustainability pressures, and the behind-the-scenes realities that most consumers and industry professionals never see. Today's guest helps us do just that. Chris Birchby is the founder of Kula and Bare Republic, sun care brands he created after his parents' melanoma diagnosis, inspired a mission to help prevent skin cancer. Immersing himself in organic skincare and advanced sunscreen formulations, he went on to build two category-defining companies, ultimately selling both to S.C. Johnson. Today, Chris is developing a new mission-driven stealth startup in the hair care space, slated to launch in fall of 2026. He holds a BA in English and Art and an MFA from the Art Center College of Design. He remains deeply involved in both the arts and business communities as a trustee of the Museum of Contemporary Art in San Diego and a board member of David's Toothpaste. Chris lives in Solana Beach with his wife, AJ, their 4 children, and 2 energetic dogs. This episode of Beauty Confidential is brought to you by Creative Solutions Consulting, the beauty industry's behind-the-scenes powerhouse. From packaging engineering and product development to supply chain strategy, compliance, and operational guidance, Creative Solutions Consulting partners with brands to bring thoughtful, high-performance products from concept to shelf. Whether you're launching, scaling, or rebranding, we help you build beautifully and intelligently. Learn more at creativesolutions-consulting.com. I am so excited to finally kick off this podcast. It's been a dream and a goal in the making since 2024, and it is finally happening. I couldn't be more excited and honored to debut the podcast with one of my mentors, you. Honestly, I couldn't think of a better, more fitting first guest than the person who has been in the front seat of my career. I remember my very first interview with you 11 years ago. I was so scared, but passionate, and you invested in my potential every step of the way and helped shape the foundation of who I am in this industry today. This is such a full circle moment for me. Welcome to the show, Chris.
I'm just honored to be here as your guest on this podcast and really excited. I haven't spoken about anything in quite a bit as far as like beauty and skincare and business, just because I've been in stealth mode on a new startup. And so I've been trying to kind of keep that under wraps and focused on that. But it's really nice to be able to pop up and discuss Kula and our amazing adventure together and go over some of the wins and losses and learnings and things that still keep me up at night sometimes. Of course, which, are always many.
You and us both? No, I think it's amazing. I think, like I said, it was definitely a full circle moment for me. And, I do have moments where I think about where my journey began and times with you and my interview process and really like the development process overall with Kula always stands out with me since it was the beginning of my career. So I know that there's a really heartfelt story behind why you launched Kula. So I would love to hear a little bit about the origins of that, why you decided on the name Kula, and then of course that epic, iconic color blue that you came up with. Would love to hear a little bit about that.
I mean, in the beginning, first, I thought I was making a surfer sunscreen in the beginning, and I had just no idea. And I had a full list of all these crazy names that I was thinking of in the beginning. And really, I took a step back and started doing some research into just sunscreen, the origins of sunscreen, the origins of what indigenous people used all around the world for centuries. And it took me to some stories with some Native American tribes, and specifically went up to the Bella Coola region in British Columbia. And the name Coola just immediately stuck. I was living in LA at the time. I love that the name was embedded with the word cool, which you think for sunscreen is something that you would strive for. Potentially it had LA even in there a little bit, and it was succinct. Nobody else was using it. I think the only use online was for a like a Dragon Ball or Pokemon character using it. So it was available, and availability sometimes is when you stack rank things, it is kind of the top dog. So yeah, I kind of checked a whole bunch of boxes, and this was in the early days when I was just learning to acquire the intellectual property around it. Websites, Coola Sun Care, Coola Sunscreen. That was back in the day when sunscreen was still allowed per the FDA. That pretty quickly after I launched, or was getting ready to launch, sunscreen was pulled out. No, sunblock. That's how long ago it was. Sunblock was pulled out. So I had Coola Sunblock, Coola Sunscreen, CoolaSunCare.com. But and the color blue, that was partially a nod to Caribbean blue waters. It was very much in response to what was currently in market. As far as the other colors and other brands, I was envisioning how it would stick out on the shelf. And there were a lot of oranges, deep blue color was copper tone, Banana Boat was orange, Hawaiian Tropic had that really wonderful ombre of browns based upon skin, I guess, tones or quality of the depth of your color from being out in the sun. Of course, we look back at that now, and it's not quite as appropriate because it was looking at how a white person's skin would look in the sun, the varying stages of bronzeness. So, which Sunbum was actually able to capture kind of that aesthetic very nicely. I love their branding and what they were able to do with it. But Coola at the time was looking for something that would be very distinctive in the color. And there's also a little subtle nod to Tiffany blue in there. It connoted this prestige and richness. And our Pantone color, 319, very close. I don't know if it's identical or not, but it's certainly very close to Tiffany blue. And what that was, somewhat of a happy accident that very much embraced and helped cement the color for me from the early days.
Yeah. I think that 319C, I think, will forever live in my brain and in my heart. We worked with it so often. And sunscreen has a personal place in your heart, right?
It
You have
does.
a personal
It
journey with that?
Yeah, I mean, the origin story, my beginnings of the company was both of my folks had melanoma within a pretty relatively short time period, maybe a year apart from each other. I was living out in California. I went to graduate school at the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, and I spent a year in New York after college trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And through that process, I was applying to graduate programs and was fortunate to get in and moved out. And coming from the East Coast, I wanted to live as close to the beach as possible. So I landed in Venice and ended up doing this reverse commute to Pasadena for years or so, but just loved Venice. And it was in Venice. I grew up in New Jersey, and it was in Venice where I discovered all things organic and clean. There was organic juiceries and dry cleaners and grocery stores. So it was something very new for me. And when after my parents had their melanoma diagnoses, and fortunately they caught it, both of them in time, and are still very active users of Coola out in the sun quite a bit, I went to a dermatologist for the first time ever. I went under that ultraviolet light and had a scared straight moment, the way I imagine a smoker looks at a smoker lungs and sees all the damage and vows to make a change. And so I started looking for good sunscreen to wear. I was surfing often and down at the beach, and I started looking for a more natural sunscreen because that was how I was starting to make my purchases in Venice, and being influenced by friends and associates in the community that I lived in there, and realizing the value of making better for you choices. And The fact that obviously your skin is your biggest organ and covering it up with a lot of products with ingredients that I had no idea or chemicals, I just was looking to simplify. And Badger was really the only product out at the time, the only brand that was making a natural, clean sunscreen with minimal ingredients. However, the aesthetics, it was just so hard for me to make that leap to just being just white.
Yeah.
And that started the Kula journey. I was out of graduate school. I was making paintings in my studio. I had a little side detour. I played poker for a couple years. I would call it semi-professionally in summertime in Las Vegas and online quite a bit in tournaments. I was able to travel a bit for that. And that was also provided the seed money for Kula in the beginning. But it was really out of my art studio that I started thinking about how can I continue to make things, but be more engaged and more mission driven, purposeful with what I'm doing. I was making paintings and smoking pot and staying in my studio all day long. And then I was like, what am I doing at the end of the day? What am I contributing? This is a lot of fun, but I was fortunate that I was able to make a transition at the time to something that was much more meaningful to me, but also fulfilled kind of my love for making things and holding things and building something. And I realized I was an English and art double major in college, and my passion for copywriting, for example, I wasn't really using any of that in my art practice, but making something tangible that you can hold and feel, that surprise and delight of good packaging, good product, good marketing and branding really stuck with me, I think, throughout kind of my Kula journey. And it was one of the areas that helped us to stand out a little bit more in the beginning when we were first trying to get to market, which, was a 3-year ordeal.
I remember one of the terms that I always sort of cycle back to Kula was I feel like you and Kula really coined the term farm to face from.
That was amazing stroke of luck that was available for us to trademark at the time. And that was part of the early stages of the company where I realized that to stand out in a very crowded space where a lot of the products are just commodified, or you're buying it from the same laboratories as other competitive brands, and the differences in the formulas can be somewhat minimal. Of course, we tried at Kula to really push the edge there with our a formula that was 70% at its core. So longer story there, but in formulating with one hand behind our back, it felt like for a lot of those years relative to the aesthetics that other brands were able to achieve using silicone-based ingredients, etc. Or so that we were fortunate to get that trademark. We also trademarked field to face, and we had one company who I'm actually quite friendly now with, the founder and owner of that company, who had started using farm to face around the same time as us. They claimed prior artwork. We had the trademark. Their prior artwork claim was weak at best. It was just a little something on a website that they had that was not in commerce. And so it started some negotiations. What do we do? And we ended up negotiating. We traded field to face for the rights for farm to face. But then farm to face, which is again a wonderful term, it was always at the risk of becoming ubiquitous, where you would lose currency with it. You would lose the ability to hold the trademark if it became common usage. And so we started then having to write letters. And this is when we had no money for attorneys. And so write letters to just let companies know when we saw them using the term that, hey, this is a legally trademarked term of ours. We're just giving you notice. Please discontinue use of it. And that usually was enough to trim the field a little bit from some of the competitors out there using it. Over time, we realized it was the type of phrase that we would have to be very aggressive in our defense of, and that just wasn't our main interest at the time. There was so many struggles just trying to build a brand, the 100 things that you have to do every single day. That was one of those battles where we pick or chose. And so, we used it as much as we could. We've used it probably more. And in retrospect, was there more storytelling to be done around that mark? Absolutely. We should have been out there with our farmers, telling the story from the field, from the farm, about the ingredients and the whole kind of chain of getting that produce or ingredient or extract to the manufacturing process as quick as possible because of spoilage, because it was organic, telling the story about growing without the use of pesticides, non-GMO. There was a lot that we could have leaned into that we didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it was trying to juggle 100 balls at one time, it felt like. Or what's the saying? Drink water out of a fire hose is often what it felt like at Kula every day, although it was glorious. And I look back so fondly with some of those early memories.
Yeah. I think that it teaches us. So I feel like one of the lessons there is for myself too, is really utilizing and leaning on the relationship, right? So like the raw material suppliers, they've got those direct relationships with those farmers, and we can really lean on them and their existing relationships with them to really help to provide us some clarity around that, some learnings, and really just helping us with a little bit of the story and the origin. So I think that I've also learned in my experience in the industry, really leaning on those types of relationships, because a lot of that's already been captured by some of our suppliers. And then
Oh,
using that in the storytelling.
absolutely. And that's a great lesson that, when you're given kind of this low-hanging fruit of a great partner who brings a lot of research, story, and authenticity to what you're doing, lean in and use that as much as possible, because you can never do everything on your to-do list, and help from friends and partners is invaluable.
Absolutely. What would you say was like your first reality check when you realized that skincare or sunscreen, sun care were really more complex than you thought? Did you think it was going to be like, a 2 to 3 month process, and then you realized there were all these really complex steps? What did that experience look and feel like for you?
Getting to market for me was this 3-year journey where we had a number of hurdles to overcome. And I will just jump right to one of them towards the end. Was we had parabens as our preservative. And it was right at the time when parabens were being demonized. And I had not realized the importance of focus at this time, and focus in everything, and focus especially in your storytelling about your brand. And, also authenticity and being true to your beliefs. The chemists we worked with all said, hey, this is just mom bloggers that are angry about ingredients, and the parabens are wonderful and they've been used for years and they're the best preservative system and you should keep them in. I'd go out and I'd meet with potential accounts, and we ended up launching with a lot of boutiques and resorts, spas, a lot of smaller independent accounts in the beginning, and really passionate business owners, many of them former estheticians, a lot of them very savvy with the ingredients. And they all had a very strong perspective as well, that they weren't a good ingredient, that there were better options out there. I realized early on, we were able to reformulate out prior to launch without parabens, because for my limited time to be able to tell the coolest story, I want to tell an uplifting, positive story about what we're doing different and what makes Kula special.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be a shill for the paraben industry, which I barely know about. I was learning all these ingredients. I didn't come from a background of, chemistry. I didn't come from a business background. I was so naive in the beginning. And that's potentially one of the things that was a hindrance, but also helpful. My naivety and just will to do it, to get through those first years of big challenges that we had along the way, and keep on thinking it's going to be, it's right around the corner. Right around the corner is where we're going to, and getting there. But parabens was an example of where the lab, the chemists were telling me, let's don't change it. This is how we formulate. The ingredients are totally fine. There's safety data out there about it. However, there was such a rising tide of movement against parabens.
Mm-hmm.
And if I tried to swim upstream and fight that battle, it was kind of to what end? I didn't care about parabens one way or the other, because I didn't know who do I believe in this? All I realized was I don't want to be spending my precious time when I have somebody for a minute or 30 seconds, and I'm trying to tell them. And as soon as that's the first question that they would be asking at the time. And then it would be an immediate turnoff. And especially as we're trying to tell a story about, healthier, better for you, cleaner sunscreen.
Mm-hmm.
Making those decisions being true to, kind of yourself and the brand, but also just avoiding potential pitfalls out there that are going to detract and take you away from that singular focus that you need to really be a brand storyteller and an advocate, a passionate advocate. I mean, in the beginning, I also didn't even like speaking about the brand. And I was hopeful that somebody else would do that. And I thought of myself as, oh, I'm the founder. Somebody sales is going to go and talk about it. But absolutely, absolutely not. If I can't be the biggest passionate evangelical for Kula, I can't expect anybody else to be. And not to mention, I didn't have the means to even hire anyone in the beginning anyway for a long time. And so I would go and buy remnant space at any of these little trade shows, industry shows. It was basically the booths that they would have on the back, the people that they didn't sell out, or maybe people didn't show up for that you could get a deal on. I'd buy remnant space in the back of every industry or trade magazine. So you buy, it's not even like a full page in the back or a half page. You buy a little quarter page in the back, just as they're about to go to print and can negotiate a deal on that. I was meeting people on meetup.com. It was back for the spa industry in the beginning. There were these spa connects that we were doing in Southern California. And I was living in LA at the time and driving around and bringing Kula and meeting spa directors and estheticians and talking about the ingredients and the formula and letting them try it out and test the goop and give feedback on the scents and the texture and the different types of formulas. In the beginning, there was no face body sport. It was just one. But by the time we launched, there was a face, body, and a sport. There was 3 different scents, unique scents: cucumber for the face, plumeria for the body, mango for the sport, and then an unscented version of each as well. But even finding natural scents, something that we've worked on for years together, and the challenges and difficulty of not only finding something that was a natural, how do you even write that on the inky? Back in those early days, it wasn't quite as complicated as it became, as far as putting in every ingredient that constitutes the full natural scent, which could be like 20 different ingredients that you don't know. They all sound like chemicals, and it takes away everything that we're trying to accomplish by having minimal ingredients on the back. But it was all those challenges in the beginning, which in retrospect, it was wonderful. We had no idea how to address them, and sitting in the trenches together and the office trying to figure it out. But those first 3 years were a real challenge. And I'm not sure if, maybe this is the time to just tell that quick little origin story as well with how that evolved. But
absolutely.
My first lab, they were a small little lab. This was out it wasn't in Riverside. This was out in the valley outside of Los Angeles. There's a whole network around Chatsworth area of a lot of small independent manufacturers. A lot of them fly-by-night ones that come and go pretty quickly. And in my opinion, were there most often just in their own self-interest and to prey upon individuals who came with a great idea for a product who they try to force big minimums on. And 99% of them, they'd never see them again. And they'd make their shampoo or hand lotion or perfume or whatever this concept and idea that they might have, and they'd never see them again because the challenge to actually get to that second run is immense.
Yeah.
And so this first lab that I went to, they made me a wonderful sunscreen. It felt so lightweight. It was so smooth. It was not tacky at all. And it was a mineral-based sunscreen that I just couldn't believe. But of course, it became too good to be true, because as I was about to go to market with my first batch, so I'd already filled them in the tubes. And somebody asked, do you have your SPF validation testing? What is that? I've never heard of that. Or my, water resistance testing or RIPT. I had no idea about any of that. So I went and did my SPF testing after my product had already been filled in all the tubes. It was SPF 30 and it came back SPF 0. So what they did, and it turned out it was 2 brothers. One of them told me, when I called him up, he's like, I'm no longer in business with my brother. We're shutting down. He did something very unethical. And basically they just sold me whatever goop that they had in the back, lotion, that they were not using anymore. And then they closed down and were gone. But it was just a total loss. And I had no recourse back. The second time around, I did my SPF validation testing before filling. And this was another lab that was out in Chatsworth. And they did all the silk screening on the tubes, beautiful paint on silkscreen because at the time I didn't want labels. I wanted everything to be as premium feeling as possible. I loved the texture of silkscreen on a tube. I loved using matte and gloss together. I was inspired by the packaging on a Patron bottle. On the back of the bottle, there's a foil sticker with a hand sign, kind of a little batch number. So for our face products, we actually had it was like similar to what a Pond's skin cream container that looked like a hockey puck used to be. And I had a custom Kula embossed little plastic seal underneath on top, a disc that would fit on top. And then for safety reasons, I had a foil seal that wrapped around that had an individual number. It looked like a typewriter where the numbers were slightly off kilter on each one that was individually wrapped around it. Everything felt to me very premium at the time. And so they did all the silk screen there. So I tested the formula, it all tested out. I was very excited. They silk screened the tubes and the componentry. They filled them. I went over there right after the runs were complete. I opened up the case box. I picked it up. It looked beautiful. All the silk screen came right off in my hand from the first tube. The next one, all the silk screen came off again. It was on it like by static electricity. Like you could just take it on your shirt, rub it, and it was a blue tube with no directions, no drug facts, no brand name, no SBF number. Oh my gosh. Nothing. And the entire run was like that. They claimed that the tubes, the tubes were extruding in oil from the plastic, which made the silk screen, the paint, not adhere properly. I did not believe that was the case. I had sent the packaging over to, it was one of the big German companies like Rexam or Alcan, and they took the time to respond back. No, the tubes are totally perfect. They used the wrong inks. Oh, man. And so they refused to acknowledge that or refund or admit any wrongdoing. So I had to find an attorney. I found an attorney on Craigslist because that's what I was using for everything back in the day. We met at a Starbucks out in the valley, outside of LA. I saw him. He got off a bus at the Starbucks. So he didn't have transportation or an office.
Oh boy.
We were a perfect match for each other as big underdogs here. And the gentleman this lab, he had inherited the lab from his parents. He was a type of guy who drove like a Rolls Royce to the lab. The working conditions, maybe were not ideal inside. He was very bottom line driven and very swarmy. And he did not want to pay us any money at all. He had a high-priced Beverly Hills type of lawyer. We ended up in arbitration. And in the arbitration, I ended up basically asked if we could go outside and discuss. And he had just pulled out a wad of cash from his pocket. And that was how he wanted to settle it, which we ended up doing for about 33 cents on the dollar for my entire run, which once again, I lost a lot of money and a lot of time. Third time around, and I kept on learning my lesson. So during this whole process, I had thought I was going to do a surfer sunscreen. And through this process, I met an incredible consultant. And this is where my advice for entrepreneurs, people starting out is find a mentor, find a consultant, find somebody that knows the industry and help educate yourself. I mean, these days there's a lot more tools online, AI, all this. However, I had no idea. And her name was Laura Chisholm. She had a small company called Product Place. She ended up becoming the VP at Hourglass Cosmetics and has a illustrious career herself and a wonderful woman and my mentor in the beginning. And she helped me pivot from surf to boutique spa resort, where there was an opportunity for a niche brand like mine at the price point that I needed to be at, that Kula needed to be at, which was also something that I didn't take into consideration in the beginning at all. I did learn QuickBooks. I did assemble my cogs and put it all together. And as I was doing that, realized that my margins and what I would be selling it for in a surf setting, I would never be able to compete and sell this product. And it was really only by having a higher price point at a more premium or prestige retailer that I would be able to support the cost of ingredients and the cost of goods for the products that we were making. And so I started meeting in LA, going out to all these small little mom and pop independent beauty stores and boutiques. I'd go to more premium ones like Fred Siegel Apothecary. I'd go to spas and meet the spa directors and the estheticians And I would just cold call them and come in with some white lab samples, like white plastic container lab samples of the product, and ask them if I could have a couple moments of their time for feedback.
Yeah.
Feedback on the scents and the textures and the ingredients and what are they looking for, and started having these conversations. And so by the third time around, we really leveled up again the formulas as well as the SKU. For the first time, there was 3 different SKU. I realized the importance and need for a specific sensitive formula for the face, a more luxurious moisturizing one for the body, and then a more water resistant formula for sport, and wanted to come up with unique scents that, and not like the kind of ubiquitous coconut scent that kind of permeated the entire industry at that point, but thought that some more kind of spa inspired scents would also give us a uniqueness and a point of difference. And so it was really through all of those conversations with many of whom became some of our first retailers and had seen us through all the challenges and struggles. And their feedback was vital to who we became, how we talked about the brand, and the copy that we were using, how we presented it, the aesthetics as we tried to match up and marry to the aesthetics of the Montage and the Four Seasons, and very premium, and how we would fit in these retailers. And so that third time around was our third laboratory at this point. Great formulas, did all the testing, everything passed, everything was above board, filled.
Everything stayed on the component.
That paint stayed on the component. The components were wonderful. I had special introductory kits that had really nice, what became my shelf talker. So I was inspired by an old, I don't know if it was National Geographic kind of card set that we had as kids that had animals on them. They were these maybe like 6-inch by 6-inch cards that had animals on one side and facts on the other, and a whole stack of them. And so it was a thicker paper, thicker stock, something I wanted to be able to reuse. And then realized I could buy acrylic frames that were approximately, I think they were 5 by 7 inches, that these cards that we would send out with promotional material, they would have maybe, our one press hit that we had some language or signage about the product, that then the retailer could take these cards, put them in, they're double-sided, put them in the 5 by 7 acrylic, and then put them as shelf talkers next to our products on shelf so that we could tell the brand story a little more. Because I realized that was something that was really vital that we're missing, was being able to tell the brand story. The product could look good. It was unique color. It kind of stood out a little bit. But without the brand story, nobody would know what we represent, what our point of difference is, et cetera. Having those shelf talkers was really critical in the beginning for just getting just a little attention. But that third run of products came out wonderful. We were storing it at a warehouse and shipping out in the valley, and was just getting ready to go to market. And I call early in the morning, and there had been a warehouse fire, and the entire warehouse burned down with all. And I drove out there, and I saw there was little blue blobs. The whole thing that was gone, the warehouse, there was no roof. It was just charcoal and little smoldering little blue blobs. And it turned out that they didn't have any fire insurance. And I couldn't believe it, because they were a warehouse and shipping distribution company. So their lawyer told me, basically, there's nothing here for you. This poor family lost everything. And my response was that this is one of their obligations, was to have insurance for their business. I'm the one who lost everything. And so once again, I found a different attorney this time, also on Craigslist. We ended up very similar outcome, 33 cents on the dollar back for everything that we lost. But at this point, I had run through most of my money. I was a bit despondent from the 3 years of hard work in it, that felt like it had gone to waste, but also felt like I was so invested at this point in making this a reality, and I needed to see it through. And so fortunately, I was able to do one more run of products. This is where we took the parabens out. So the silver lining of the fire was that was the run that we took the parabens out. So when we finally went to market with our fourth iteration of Kula, it was with a network of independent retailers and some spa and resort partners who were more corporate, but they had been part of the journey, the story, the feedback group that had inspired and guided a lot of our decisions. And they gave us the first opportunity for retail. And launching into a network of smaller retailers like that who were also passionate and somewhat invested in the
Mm-hmm.
brand, it gave us an opportunity to keep on iterating and make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And if we had one big account in the beginning, for example, if we launched into Ulta right away in the
Yeah.
beginning, would have been in and out so quickly, that would have been the end of the company. So everything, you look back and it was the silver lining. It took us a while to get there, but because of the journey and the improvements in formula and just overall know-how and knowledge of what I wanted to do, who Kula wanted to be,
Mm-hmm.
we were able to have some early success that we were able to continue to build upon over the next, became almost a 20-year journey.
So there was so much disappointment, devastation, setbacks along the way. I mean, one after the other, after the other. How did you feel during that? I mean, you seem very optimistic about it. And looking back on it now, there were a lot of lessons to be learned. And by the time you hit that sort of last leg of the race, that's when you discovered, the parabens would be taken out and things like that. So the journey of it, looking back on it now, there was such a blessing at the end of the road there. But when you were in the trenches, one disappointment after the next, how did you keep your head up? How did you stay positive? I feel like that's definitely something that entrepreneurs and just people in general these days need to kind of hold on to. Is for me, this year has been all about perspective for me. And so I'm just curious about what your perspective was when you were kind of feeling like you were in the mud and really like to your knees and into your waist with kind of like challenge after challenge. How did you continue to see the light? How did you continue to push and power through with the financial challenges that came with each of those disappointments? And finally, that sort of the fire of devastation. How did you kind of pull yourself out and keep yourself going? Did you have a army of people in your support circle? What was it that really kind of challenged you to keep pushing and powering through?
Great question. As I look back and think about, myself at the time, I think I was young and had a lot of energy and optimism
Mhm.
and naivety. I was very competitive and I really wanted to win. I wanted to get out there and make it happen. And there's a certain amount of willpower that I think all founders need to push through the walls, because there's going to be a lot of them,
Mhm.
and to get things done. Nobody's going to do it for you. You have to, against all odds, be willing just to keep on pushing all in. Timing, and you look back and there's a lot of kind of moments in my life that maybe synced up around the launch time. I believe it was in 2006. And this is where, we talk about finances and financing the company, and that obviously it's a big challenge. And I started playing online poker when I was in grad school. My grandmother had taught us how to play poker. I have 300 brothers. We're all very competitive. And so I'd always played poker, but it was in grad school that I really found a passion and love for it, read every book that I could on it. I was meeting a lot of poker players in these online chat groups and forums. So found a great group of peers to share stories and learnings. And that was really 2004, 2005, 2006. And in 2006, it's out in Las Vegas. I had a share house with a couple guys, and I happened to final table a tournament that was a $1,500 buy-in, had over 2,200 people. And I was sitting there at the table. First place was like $750,000. Fourth place was, I believe it was around $145,000, which for a $1,500 buy-in was a really great return. And I was
Mhm.
the chip leader. And I had developed kind of a name for myself online. Marvin Garden was my pseudonym and my homage to my New Jersey roots and passion for games and Monopoly. And we took a break and we went to discuss chop, which is basically where you would make a deal, maybe based on how much money is left and how many chips each player has and a percentage wise. And then you split it all up and then you just play for the bracelet and a certain amount of money just for first place. And I ended up getting fourth place, and it was enough money but it wasn't too much money for me to put it all into Kula for this final run, $50,000. I got enough money that I went back and just went all in on Kula. And there's no plan B at this point for me. I am all in on Kula. I wanted to go for it, and Kula was my go for it. And so focusing 100% on Kula and going all in was really kind of the last push that the brand, that myself, we needed to start trying to find some success.
Yeah. I feel like Kula may have even been a slightly different and unique pivot for your creativity and your art too, right? Because you did have such an intricate focus and design around Kula, the plumerias that you used, and really kind of like the outlay of the artwork and things like that. So maybe that was just like a different outlet for you. And then you talked too about writing copy and how that was something that you were really passionate about too. So maybe it was just like a very timely pivot for you.
Yeah, I mean, I've become more, I don't know if a spiritual is the right word, but over the time, where the universe, I think, really kind of pushes you in the right direction, or gives you the opportunity, lays it out there for you to potentially, take advantage of or not. And things just synced up that way at that period in my life. And, it was, making those decisions of how to arrange the copy on the front of the packaging. What is too much? What is too little? How do you tell the story? Finessing over those little details, which at the time are major details and still are, major details for a brand. And how do you put those pieces together and effectively tell your story with, again, that real limited window, whether it's somebody walking by and seeing it on the shelf, or, handing it to someone, talking about it, I began finessing over, each one of those, and obsessing, really is what I should say, is over each one of those decisions. And that's kind of when I knew it. I was very happy with what I was doing at the time. And I think that played a big role in it too. Like it was every day was a challenge, and everything was new. And there were so many different aspects of the business, whether it's shipping out of my, the downstairs, my garage, or with stamps.com, in those early days, as I mentioned, trying to learn QuickBooks, which I had never learned spreadsheeting, Excel before, still horrible at it. And even my design, I had to work with designers for everything. I'd hand draw it all out, because what I learned in art school did not include any kind of design suite stuff. It was all hands-on. I was making physical paintings and objects.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any of that training. And at a certain point felt, I have so much else to do. Is it worth my time to learn it? It's amazing. I still think that and I even think that with Excel as well. Now, finally, AI has caught up, so that I don't have to potentially spend that, 10,000 hours of learning to become an expert, where now it's just, with some prompts, you can really,
it's done for you in moments.
Totally jump that learning curve. So it's a wonderful time to be a founder of anything, I think, and creating and building something, because the tools are just even so much more available and democratized than what they were before. And a big part of that is, who do you go to? Who do you find to help? Who is an expert in this? And everybody can be somewhat of an expert in everything these days. Just if they spend the right time and the right prompts, it's amazing. It's an amazing opportunity for people out there these days.
I think that's one of the reasons why, it is one of the reasons why I decided to launch a podcast, because we have so many conversations with people in our like small little direct networks. And we think about like how large our actual network is, right? You know so many people. One of the things that I think about all the time, Chris, is the fact that you have always been a founder who was never afraid to have conversations with other founders. Sometimes I think that business owners and founders just kind of want to keep them themselves and kind of control the kinds of people that they have conversations with. And they're afraid to speak with their competitors. And I think that was one of the things that I always appreciated about you, because you would talk directly to your competitors. You weren't afraid to, rub shoulders and be friends and be kind to them. And I think at the end of the day, we're all here to bring whatever you're trying to bring to your consumer is, right? Whether it's sunscreen, skincare, the goal is to take care of the consumer, to take care of each other. And how do we do that? Sometimes we'll do it better when we have conversations with our competitors in like a very friendly conversational way where we're not feeling like we're in a competitive environment. We're really just talking about what's missing in the industry, how can we fill it, what fits within our brand. And so that's really kind of what inspired this podcast, because I have so many people globally in my network, and it's an opportunity to give everyone a voice at the table. So I have, partners that, I've been working with for many, many years in China and Taiwan and Korea and India and Germany and France and places like that, but they're not able to have a voice at the table. So this podcast is an opportunity to kind of have a broad platform and give everybody a seat at the table. And so the reason why I mention that is because you have been able to have such really incredible relationships with people in multiple industries. What kind of advice would you give to an entrepreneur who maybe doesn't know where to start? Would you say kind of build your network? I know that you talked a little bit about taking advantage of some of those sort of last minute boosts, last minute sales, little corner spots in an article or a magazine. What types of creative avenues would you suggest to an entrepreneur who's trying to build a brand for themselves and trying to find the right people to talk to and the right networks to build and things like that? What have worked for you, and what would you say to inspire them?
I think this is a great way to think about starting a business and being in an industry, is that they're not all your competitors, they're your peers, and that there's space for everyone, or if not everyone, there's space for a couple people in your category to all achieve success. And, it really is rising tide, lifting everybody up at a certain point, because we're all facing similar challenges and we're all trying to get to a place where we can realize whatever the goals that we set out in the beginning, whether it's creating a company that you can steward and run for potentially a multi-generational thing, or, as we were fortunate enough to do, find a great strategic partner who hopefully will also be stewarding a multi-generational version of your brand to come. My advice, I mentioned things like focus earlier a little bit. This is something that I lacked in the beginning. Tried to take on too many opportunities, do too much. The power of saying no can't be overstated, especially in the beginning, because there's even more opportunity. I believe these days are opportunities out there that present themselves for brands. So just like laser focus on your goal, your product offerings, your marketing messaging. You can't be everything to everyone. Don't try. Be authentic. And authenticity is so hard these days. And also just having your voice heard is so hard these days. And if you do want to be heard, authenticity, I think, is a big part of that. What I see is a lot more data-driven, insight-driven approach to this category. And I think there's even, I feel like, a little trending away from when he launched, brand was king. It was creating a brand, a vibe, products. We always thought of ourselves as a product first company and innovation first. And innovation was very critical to Kula over the years. I think these days that more so than ever. And I think a lot of that comes from data-driven insights into, what are opportunities in the market. It's spaces, gaps people aren't maybe filling with product. What are trending ingredients? What is fast can you get to market with it? I would say, as you're building your network, I would make sure to try to include people who have an interest in growth marketing, Amazon, for example, and making sure that you, or the right outside agency, or if you're doing that yourself, really figuring out all the little tweaks to be made to try to optimize your sales strategy and sell through. Yeah, and I see that, with AI even pushing forward. I think there's a lot of tools that companies and brands can use for that. But even when it's going to distribution. So I have a new startup that I am in stealth mode on. I can just speak very little of. I am fortunate to have some great founders with me on this, something that's very personal and mission driven to me, which is, it feels incredible to find something like that again, because after Kula, which was so personal, how do you find something that is authentic and real? And I did. And I felt like, once again, the universe kind of just presented this opportunity. And I was able to put together this group of my co-founders and take advantage of this opportunity to try to get it to market via a brand, which will be launching at the fourth quarter next year. So I am thinking about these things myself right now.
Yeah.
Go to market again. What are the right channels? What is the right focus? And what is the right messaging? Yeah, it's so much fun doing it for the second time around, knowing what I the lessons I learned along the way. But I will say it's also so new as well because of all these advances in AI. And if you're not trying to leverage and use that in every aspect, you're going to fall behind. And so my advice for an entrepreneur, especially your team is lean in the beginning. That's you. Maybe, somebody else. Take your time, try to set yourself up with the right look around, find the right software, programs, prompts to then use to kind of build yourself a working suite, support suite of, what, otherwise you would have been outsourcing a lot of this, and you can do it internally these days, but it's a more data-driven approach to it. But I think there really needs to be a personalization and authenticity with these products and with the brands. I mean, product-wise, I'd mentioned, I feel like it's moving a little bit more to specific, like effective, clinically proven formulas for, everyone's kind of what specific need they're looking for. These days you have acne or rosacea, whatever, dry skin, or you're looking for a shampoo for colored hair. You're looking for one thing specifically, and you want to find the best of it. Now, is one brand going to have the best for all of that? I don't think the consumer's thinking that way anymore. In fact, I know the consumer's not thinking that way anymore. They are looking and shopping for their specific needs and having the right product for that, and being able to quickly iterate and introduce those formulas. I think no longer can you have a cycle where you're taking a year and a half to get a product to market. By that point, you might be a year past where a window of opportunity for that specific ingredient or need to be met, because competitors are going to be coming out that much faster. So, figuring out the efficiencies to get to market quickly, not be burdened with huge runs of product. That's something that hopefully is a thing of the past. Contract manufacturers still, I'm sure, are going to try to force that on you and push that on you, but be nimble, fail quickly, and move on, and have extreme focus would be my advice to entrepreneurs these days.
I love it. Chris, thank you so much. This was such a perfect way to launch off my first episode of the podcast.
Oh my gosh. Well, it was really like such a pleasure being here. Honestly, I feel like we're just getting started, and
I know
I'm ready to go for another hour. So
I know exactly.
Would be thrilled to come back in the future. And it's been so much fun kind of reliving some of this through the conversation with you, and hearing your as well, and hopefully sharing a couple insights that might lead somebody in a different direction, or help provide some focus to what they're doing. Because again, I didn't have that in the beginning, and I would have saved years and so much money with that. But there was just so many learnings along the way. These days I see so many great tools out there to help entrepreneurs on their journey. But thank you for providing this platform and space to have these conversations.
Absolutely. I love being able to pull back the curtain on the whole product development process, the pains, the victories, and kind of all of that, and really giving a true, authentic, and transparent sort of filtered look at the process.
Well, it was absolutely my pleasure, and best of luck. I look forward to listening to the podcasts when they launch, and please have me back.
I will definitely part two.
Awesome.
All right, Chris.
Thank you too.
Okay. And to our listeners, if you loved this episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a colleague or someone who's dreaming of launching their own beauty brand. Trust me, they need this. We all needed this. Join me next time for a powerful conversation with two industry experts as we unpack how the global supply chain really impacts beauty brands, from tariffs and freight timelines to margin pressure, compliance, and manufacturing strategy. Every decision affects how fast you can launch, how well you can scale, and how profitable your brand becomes. It's another candid, behind the scenes conversation shaping the future of beauty. Until then, stay curious, stay inspired, and stay beautiful.